Hello, Potomac Crossing Ward. This is the lesson for 2021 Come Follow Me, lesson number 21, covering Doctrine and Covenants 51 through 57. So for Doctrine and Covenants 51, this section deals with matters that are seemingly secular to us, namely the apportionment of lands. However, the Lord indicates this issue is one where the people must be organized according to His laws or be cut off. The underlying issue is the imparting of your substance to those in need, an issue which receives considerable treatment in the Doctrine and Covenants. If we look at Doctrine and Covenants section 40, 30 through 55 as an example. Those who have lands deeded to them, which is a secular law, and donated to the church for reapportionment to those in need, which is a spiritual law, will be found faithful, wise, and just stewards. Thus, the matter of apportionment of lands is a spiritual one when dealt with internal to the ecclesia, which we see referenced in verse 3. When dealing with the rebellious or those outside the ecclesia, the matter reverts to secular law, which we see in verses 4 through 6, and also compare Doctrine and Covenants 48:4. The historical context here is the saints from Colesville, New York, had left the persecution there to move to Ohio. They settled onto the land of Lehman Copley, who shortly thereafter left the church and insisted the settlers on his land to move off. Now, if you remember from the last lesson, Lehman Copley is the one who kind of alternated between the Shakers and the church, and then there was this confrontation between Sidney Rigdon and Parley P. Pratt and Lehman Copley, and one of the Shaker leaders in front of a group of Shakers. Now, the unpleasant reality is the Lord told them how to handle this. They told them that Lehman Copley needs to come up to speed and be the principal voice in the conversation with the Quakers, which is not what they did. So the result is Lehman ended up backing out. He ended up going with the Shakers. It also provides some underlying theological explanation for why Edward Partridge has a rough time through these sections. As the first bishop of the church, Edward had to deal with a lot of very ugly, unpleasant details of day-to-day life, like portioning out land to members and reclaiming it from them when the original owner, in this case Lehman Copley, apostatized. This is unpleasant stuff, and trying to keep an eye on religion and the Lord while dealing with this kind of difficulty is challenging for anybody. So when we go through the subsequent sections and we hear about Edward Partridge being called to repentance and being corrected, Edward is doing this like really nitty-gritty, difficult, day-to-day kind of stuff where he has to deal with unhappy members and all this like really ugly, difficult stuff. You know, Joseph Smith is up here dealing with like high-level theology, getting lots of revelations, managing all this like big umbrella, spiritual and religious stuff, while Lehman Copley is down here doing very low-level, where the rubber meets the road kind of unpleasantry. And my heart goes out to the guy. He ends up remaining faithful. Everything sounds like he was a solid guy, but he has to deal with a lot of really unpleasant stuff, and we see that when we go through these sections. Okay, section 52. This revelation is from the Fourth Conference, where the elders of the church were summoned per Doctrine and Covenants 44. It deals largely with missionary labors, calls, and the responsibilities of those called to missionary service. This section is very well structured, and I include a link in my comments into Lynn Johnson's visual representation of the structure in the text. I really recommend looking at it. This is a beautiful presentation where the Lord alternates between addressing what He expects from the missionaries and then addressing the missionaries, and it kind of goes back and forth. So the section is well structured. The Lord addresses different sets of elders, which we see in verse 3, verses 7 through 11, and verses 23 and 28. and then telling him what his expectations are. And those expectations are in verses 4 through 6, 13 through 21, and then 39 through 40. The center of verses 14 through 21 is the definition of what the Lord expects of the elders or missionaries at that time, and should be considered the primary focus of this revelation in specific and of missionaries in general. So a full-time elder, like this is one of those revelations that really should be pushed, or sections of scripture that really should be pushed on elders, like full-time missionaries, sisters and elders, and say, like, how are you supposed to conduct yourself? Focus on 14 through 21. This is where the Lord is saying, look, you need to be humble. You need to keep my commandments. You need to be obedient. And if you rely on me, then things will go well and my Spirit will guide you. I mean, this is one of those, I feel like this is one of those ones that's kind of passed over when we should pay closer attention to it. Okay, section 53. At the same conference which section 52 was received, Algernon Sidney Gilbert, who we always refer to as A. Sidney Gilbert, or just simply Sidney Gilbert, is approached by Smith and requests a revelation. The section is response to that request. The Lord encourages him to serve in the church, remain strong, keep the commandments. Now, Sidney Gilbert doesn't really get a fair shake in church history because of a single quote that he makes that gets used out of context. He says, I'd rather die than go be a missionary. And then he dies shortly thereafter. And it really gets used out of context. A more thorough review of history shows that Sidney Gilbert's really a pretty solid guy. And that single statement he makes is more a reflection over his misgivings about his own ability to preach the gospel to a population at large who is really hardened and sinful. So it's not that he's being disobedient to the Lord, it's that he's questioning his capacity in preaching to people and having any success in that. So Sidney's a pretty solid guy, and he doesn't get a fair shake over one misplaced or one out of context quote. Doctrine and Covenants, section 54. This revelation is aimed at Newell Knight concerning those in the church who will not consecrate their properties. It's interesting to note the ancient church had similar problems as well. We see this in Acts chapter 5. When it comes to people parting with their property, things get ugly fast. But again, this section is more fallout from Lehman Copley leaving the church and rescinding his offer to consecrate his land to other members of the ecclesia. So, I mean, just look at how this would play out today. If the stake president or the church told the stake president that it's time for all of us to consecrate, it's time for all of us to sell our houses, move to more modest houses, and then we use the money to then turn around and buy housing or pay rent for people who are in need, who are emigrating here to join the church. Look at how messed up the real estate market is right now. And it's, if we were all to try and sell our homes and then buy another home that's less than what we have now, for those of us who own homes and we're not renting, and then donate the money to the church, look at how difficult and how messy that would be right now among the members trying to sell their house in a real estate market that's just absolutely ridiculous right now. In a few years things will change, but when you look at this text and you read something like this, well, gee, why didn't the early members just do what the Lord told them? Because there's a really difficult, unpleasant, practical reality to doing all of this stuff. Look at how hard it would be for us today to sell our homes, buy a less expensive home, and then donate that money to the church so that other people could do that. There's a lot of practical reality behind this, and then you throw on the selfishness of, oh, I don't want to sell my house. I don't want to sell my cars. I don't want to sell my stuff and things and have a big garage sale. And if we all do this all at once right now, once word gets out that the Mormons are liquidating their stuff, it's going to devalue everything, and everyone's going to come after us with lowball offers, and we're not going to get the value out of the stuff we're trying to liquidate. So this is a difficult request between the practical reality combined with the natural man selfishness that goes with liquidating your property. Okay, so section 55, this is a revelation of W.W. Phelps. Phelps is well known because of a lot of the hymns that he wrote and in his involvement in the printing business. Aside from that, Phelps really isn't a notable character, and I feel like if he hadn't been involved in the printing business, he probably would have been one of those guys kind of swept to the side in church history. Section 56. This continues the theme from section 54, namely the problems with members failing to observe the law of consecration. Specifically, we're still dealing with the fallout from the Lehman Copley defection. While the revelation was prompted by a request from Thomas B. Marsh concerning his inability to fulfill his mission call, the reason why he is not able to fulfill that call is what is addressed here. His previously assigned companion was not available as a result of controversy over land which had been consecrated to the church's use, so Marsh asks for guidance. And then section 57. So this is, now we have a shift from Kirtland to Missouri. So 57, this is the first revelation in Missouri. This revelation is in response to three specific questions. When will the wilderness blossom as a rose? When will Zion be built up in her glory? And where will thy temple stand, unto which all nations shall come in the last days? It's interesting to note this, and these were questions asked by Smith. Interesting to note, the Lord only directly answers one of the three questions, the last one. The two when questions are skirted, presumably because they'd already been previously answered in a rather ambiguous fashion. Now, when I read this, I can't help but get the feeling that Smith is impatient for things to start going well for the church and for the ecclesia. It's been a long time for Joseph personally and his family and extended family that things have been quite difficult. And over the past about year and a half for the ecclesia, the newly formed church, things have been bad. In New York, things were rough. They moved to Kirtland, and things have not been going well. And with Lehman Copley's defection and the Colesville Saints who had settled on his land are having to leave and come down to Missouri, things are going kind of rough. If there's any expectation that things would get easier or things that would get better, this feels like Smith's voicing that, like, hey, Lord, when are things going to get better? When is the wilderness going to blossom like the rose, and the temple and Zion? Because like when Zion comes, things are going to be easy because we're all going to be of the same mind and heart, and we're going to be blessed by the Lord, and we're going to be doing things right. So hey, when are things going to get better? That's what this feels like a hey Lord, when are things going to get better? But it's couched in a scriptural theological way, and we kind of get to that, the Lord's larger theological response, in the next lesson.